The midterm elections will be held 1 year from tomorrow, on Tuesday, November 4th, 2026. By next fall, you'll be hearing much more from our UU the Vote, about our efforts to UU the Vote from our Democracy Action Team. For now, I invite us to pause and reflect on where is it that we find ourselves roughly 9 months into President Trump's second term, and to consider what we can do here and now to defend democracy and resist authoritarianism. As you turn into our driveway here at UUCF, the bottom line of our sign says precisely that: defend democracy, resist authoritarianism. Now, there are a lot of fancy words that we might use to describe the current powers that be. Kakistocracy, a government run by the worst, least qualified, and most unscrupulous people. Kleptocracy, rule by those who use political power to enrich themselves and their allies. Oligarchy, a system in which a small group of wealthy and well-connected hold power over the many. Or patrimonialism, a form of governance where loyalty to a single leader or family counts more than laws or institutions. But if I had to choose one word that most clearly names the threat facing our nation, it would be authoritarianism. The simplest way to remember what is it that authoritarianism means, it derives from the word authority, rule or control by a single authority figure. Notice, too, that authoritarianism, it contains the word author. We see it right there at the beginning of the word. And that's fitting because in an authoritarian regime, one person seeks to author everyone's reality, dictating the story, erasing truth, and rewriting facts at will. In the words of journalist Masha Gessen, we all know Trump's repertoire: government by gesture, obfuscation and lying, self-praise, stoking fear, and issuing threats. That's the distorted reality that he is trying to author, a world built on gaslighting and disinformation. And it is exhausting. Are any of you exhausted? I'm exhausted, and that's the point. Authoritarians seek to wear down we the people, to make truth feel irrelevant and resistance feel futile, until we finally just stop paying attention and retreat into our private lives, allowing them to enrich themselves and claim the powers of a king. In researching what is it that we, the people, can do in such a time as this, I read a stack of books. And if this sermon leaves you curious to dive deeper, here are 4 accessible starting points. The first is Authoritarianism, a very short introduction. They mean it. It's by James Loxton. I'm a really big fan of Oxford University Press's A Very Short Introduction series, and this volume is no exception. At just 89 pages, this pocket-sized book offers a clear and concise overview from a political scientist who distills decades of research into how authoritarian systems rise, operate, and ultimately fall. Because I promise you this: everything that has the nature to arise has the nature to fall. 2, dictatorship. It's easier than you think, by Sarah Kendzior and Andrea Chalupa, 2 journalists that use a witty graphic novel format to illustrate how it is that ordinary citizens like us can recognize, resist, and even laugh at the absurdities of creeping autocracy in everyday life. 3rd, strong men, how they rise, why they succeed, and how they fall, by Ruth Ben-Ghiat. This one's a full-length book, though it's still under 300 pages. It's a compelling and empowering study of the playbook that modern autocrats use, from Mussolini to Trump, and is written by a historian who specializes in fascism, propaganda, and the psychology of power. Finally, America, The Farewell Tour. It's by Chris Hedges. It's a deeply ethical reflection by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist on the social and spiritual decay that leaves democracies vulnerable to demagogues, leaders who cynically use fear and prejudice to manipulate we, the people. Hedges writes with the passion of a modern-day biblical prophet, calling out injustice with searing moral clarity and urging us to reclaim compassion and conscience in an age of corruption and despair. At least for now, the United States remains the world's oldest democracy. That means we, the people, still have some strong democratic roots on our side. At the same time, we need to be honest that in the broad sweep of history, democracy has been rare. So it is reckless to take it for granted. Not too long ago, the world seemed to be moving inexorably in the direction of democracy. In 1973, only about a quarter of the world's countries were democracies, but by the late 1990s, more than half were. But in the early 21st century, that progress began to reverse. According to the nonprofit watchdog organizations like Freedom House, which track the state of democracy worldwide, global freedom has declined for 19 consecutive years. Around the world, elected leaders have chipped away at checks and balances, silenced the press, undermined trust in elections, trends that we are witnessing right here in our own country. Now, for now, the United States remains classified as free, but our overall score in the Freedom in the World Index has declined over the last decade, signaling a serious erosion of our democratic institutions and civil liberties. Growing polarization, partisan interference in elections, and declining trust in government are key threats that could pave the way for further democratic backsliding. More than a decade before Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, the Unitarian minister Theodore Parker preached a famous sermon in which he described a democracy as a government of all the people, by all the people, and for all the people. Authoritarianism is the opposite. It demands obedience to authority and restricts individual freedom. According to Luxton's Authoritarianism, a very brief introduction, there are two major criteria to determine the state of a democracy. The first is, do leaders reach high office through free and fair elections in which all adults can vote, or do they take power through violence? The January 6, 2021 attacks on the U.S. Capitol remain one of the clearest warning signs in our nation's entire history of a moment when political violence was used to try to overturn the will of we, the people. The second criteria is, are basic rights like freedom of speech and freedom of assembly respected, or are critical media outlets shut down and members of the opposition harassed, imprisoned, or even killed? When late-night comedians and journalists face threats or investigations for criticizing those in power, when peaceful protesters are met with state retaliation instead of dialogue, we are seeing echoes of the same authoritarian playbook at work. Loxton underscores that while in theory these two criteria should make it easy to spot authoritarian regimes, in practice it is complicated by the fact that many of them claim to be democracies. We should not be fooled. To be a democracy, there must be universal suffrage, free and fair elections, and protection for civil liberties. If any of these are missing, the regime is authoritarian, not democratic, no matter what people try to tell you it is. Today, essential pillars of American democracy, free expression, impartial courts, electoral integrity, are under direct and growing authoritarian threat. Many of you know that I was a double major in religion and philosophy, so if you'll allow me to get a little nerdy for a moment, there's one philosopher whose work feels particularly important and haunting in such a time as this. Carl Schmitt, known as Hitler's favorite legal scholar. Schmitt is infamous for his focus on what he called a state of exception. In his words, quote, "The exception is more interesting than the rule." The exception is more interesting than the rule. Schmitt urged would-be dictators to use moments of extreme crisis to suspend normal laws and rules, claim unlimited power, and then refuse to relinquish it. If there is a major emergency, threat, or crisis, we often want our leaders to act decisively with few or any restraints. Leaders sometimes need to take immediate actions that under normal circumstances would move more slowly through committees or procedures. And if a leader is acting wisely and in good faith, such extraordinary measures can save the day, can save many lives. Schmitt recognized, however, that such a state of exception could be exploited by a cynical leader acting in bad faith. Worse still, such a leader might even manufacture a crisis as a pretext for declaring a permanent state of emergency that can then be used to entrench their own absolute authority. Now, I bring all this up not to unduly fearmonger, but to encourage us to become crystal clear about the need to defend democracy and resist authoritarianism. And these considerations, they're not abstract. To focus on one among a host of disturbing examples, President Trump has ordered National Guard troops and federal forces into major cities, including Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, Memphis, and Washington, D.C., over the objection of local and state officials. These deployments were framed as, quote, law and order measures, yet have been widely criticized for undermining states' authority and blurring the vital line between military power and civilian life. In the words of Governor Pritzker of Illinois, this has never been about safety. This is about control. Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, by the way, also put it plainly in her decision blocking President Trump from calling up National Guard troops in Oregon. She said, quote, "The president's determination was simply untethered to the facts." Said differently, the president was doing precisely what a fascist philosopher like Schmitt perversely encouraged: manufacturing a crisis as a pretext for declaring a state of exception in which he could exercise unchecked emergency powers. But as the judge concluded, this is a nation not of martial law, but of constitutional law. President Trump has defended the use of U.S. troops in American cities and told top U.S. commanders that the military would be used against, quote, the enemy within. And just this week, President Trump ordered the National Guard in every state to develop a, quote, quick reaction force of troops trained to deal with civil disturbances and riots. But here's the thing. One person's nonviolent civil resistance and peaceful uprising against oppression is another person's civil disturbance and riot. To quote one of the most powerful lines from the incredible television series Battlestar Galactica, any fans out there? The top military leader struggling to respond to a world historic state of emergency warns his officers, saying this: "There is a reason you separate the military and the police. The military fights the enemies of the state. The police serve and protect the people. When the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tend to become the people." If you're a sci-fi fan, I highly recommend Battlestar Galactica. It's a great show that also serves as a profound meditation on human nature, power, and politics. Y'all, there is so much more to say about the Trump administration's efforts to politicize the military, the threats to invoke the Insurrection Act, and the sweeping implications of the Supreme Court's terrible ruling on presidential immunity. Indeed, beyond our borders, we've already seen where such unchecked power can lead. In the recent extrajudicial killings in Venezuela, where suspected drug dealers have been executed without trial or due process under the guise of restoring order. Together, these actions test the very boundaries of power and accountability at the heart of our democracy. Maybe they were drug dealers. Maybe the law should have been brought in. But it is not okay to not have due process, because then we never know what the truth is. Gloria Steinem's prescient words also come to mind. Speaking at the first Women's March held the day after Trump's first inauguration, she reminded those of us in the crowds, "Our Constitution does not begin with I, the president. It begins with we, the people." Who else was there that day? So what can we, the people, do to break the spell of authoritarianism? What we've been doing so far, naming the problem clearly and directly, is itself a vital part of that work. Authoritarianism thrives on confusion, denial, and despair. And every time that we speak truthfully about what is happening, we help dispel the illusion that this is somehow normal or inevitable. Naming reality clearly is one essential act of resistance. We've seen that power at the recent No Kings protest. 3 of my favorite signs from the most recent one were, "We the people, radicalized by basic human decency." The small print in the corner says, "Loving your country equals loving its people." Or, "This is the government the founding fathers warned us about." Indeed it is. The third sign, "We want huddled masses, not hooded asses." Those signs make us laugh, and they remind us that humor, truth-telling, and collective courage are how we break the authoritarian spell together. Now, sometimes it can feel like change will never come. But consider one more extreme example of our own situation. Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya with an iron fist for more than 40 years. Then in 2011, he was found hiding from his own people in a drain pipe. Mussolini, in the end, was also hunted by some of his own people. Entrenched systems and leaders can seem immovable, until suddenly, sometimes unpredictably, they fall. History reminds us that the power built on fear is never stable for long, and the future has a way of breaking open in unexpected ways. So let's consider the ways that the authoritarian spell can be broken. Number one is known as the dictator's trap, the tendency of a dictator to create the circumstances that lead to their own downfall. Autocrats do not tend to like to hear the word no. And as the autocrat surrounds himself with people who only tell him what he wants to hear, they get high on their own supply, if you will. They cease to get good advice and eventually make one or more major policy blunders that cause and rally a critical mass of we the people against them. Reality can hurt you if you live in a fantasy world. Number 2, frenemies. The groups surrounding would-be dictators, including those currently supporting President Trump, always include rival factions that distrust or even dislike one another. Those internal divisions are fault lines that can be increasingly exploited and widened as the dictator's power weakens. Number 3, people power. Here in the United States of America, we, the people, still hold significant power. We have widespread access to public education, and the greater the level of education, the less people are willing to be ruled, and the more they are equipped to understand and respond when oppression grows. Likewise, the larger the middle class, the more citizens expect power to be shared rather than concentrated in the hands of a few. And finally, our many volunteer and community organizations, including groups just like UCF, help like-minded people find one another, build trust, and organize for change. Number 4 is to look for and support leaders who will prioritize accountability and transparency in government. At the heart of the so-called strong man rule that Donald Trump is attempting to deploy is that he and his allies are above the law, above judgment, not beholden to the law. He is a con man trying to run the country like it is a reality TV show. To combat that, we need new leaders who are clear that the buck stops here with them, not always passing the buck and blaming others. 5th is to focus on affordability and cost of living, wages, health care, retirement, and child benefits, where public support is overwhelming. Don't get me wrong, we must continue working to dismantle racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and every form of systemic oppression. But we also have to be crystal clear about addressing the economic anxieties that demagogues like Trump cynically exploit for their own gain. That means advocating for issues such as raising the minimum wage, providing affordable health care, protecting Social Security for retirement, strengthening child and family benefits, and investing in good, high-quality public education through and including free university education. Most importantly, always remember that you don't have to do any of this alone. As I often quote, if you're feeling overwhelmed as one person, stop being one person. We are stronger together. For more information about what that can look like, email uucfdemocracyteam@gmail.com or visit their table in the atrium and indicate if you'd like to join one or more of our action teams. 1 Million Rising for nonviolent civil resistance, federal issues, voting rights, immigration justice, climate justice, or LGBTQ+ justice. You can also always find a link on our homepage. There's a blue box right in the right-hand corner to the latest top weekly action items recommended by our Democracy Action Team, which is also included in every week as an insert to your order of service. Given the authoritarian threats to our democracy, can you read over those suggested action items each Sunday morning and pick even one to do each week? Certainly do more if you can. As you are able, please encourage others in your sphere of influence to do one or more actions as well. In this hard time, the dangers are all too real. But there are also so many reasons to hope that we will get through this. History tells us, for instance, that even in their darkest hours in the late 1970s and early 80s, when the KGB sent many Soviet dissident leaders into forced labor camps and into psychiatric institutions, the activists continued writing their books, making their art, publishing their newsletters. And when they gathered, they raised their glasses in the traditional toast to the success of our hopeless cause. And in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. As we hold that in our heart, let's sing together a hymn, Come and Go With Me to This Land. This is one of those zipper songs. So here we're going to zip in freedom and justice and singing. Let's sing together, I'm grateful to be on this journey with all of you.